Welcome into the DFS Den. It is Dave Eddy here, aka Corporal Eddie on Twitter, back for lucky number week 13 after we took a little bit of a break for Thanksgiving and whatnot. So back at it though here, looking forward to week 13. And boy, I tell you, I have got a lot of guys that we need to talk about. We've had quite a few slates so far this year, especially recently where we just haven't had a lot of good options. You've kind of just had to go with what was available and make do. And this slate is not like that. We have got a ton of options. So let's hop into it. We start with quarterbacks. I'm going to go just from top price and work my way down here. Give you whether they're a GPP, cash, or both, play. And we'll just start up with Patrick Mahomes, $8,300 on DraftKings. Great matchup here against Cincinnati Bengals. Mahomes, cash and GPP viable for me. Mahomes under 10% ownership. With the highest implied totals in one of the highest over-under games, of the week. Yes, please. I mean, maybe the best thing going for Mahomes this week really is just that there are so many, quarterback choices available. So we are going to be able to get him at, pretty reasonable ownership. Now, stacking him outside of Kelsey, has been tough this year. You just never know who's going to do what on that offense. And, that's something that they told us early in the season. And it's, absolutely coming true. It's just as difficult this week as it is any, and probably, the way it'll be the rest of the year. Mahomes and Kelsey will certainly be in play, but you've got to find ways to get unique elsewhere, to differentiate yourself because, pretty much anyone that plays Mahomes is very likely to play Kelsey as well. So I think that double stacking him makes a whole lot of sense. But again, it's, picking that double stacking partner is where the struggle is. Sky Moore makes some sense to be a little different, but how popular is he going to become? Same thing with Justin Watson. Again, way to be a little bit unique, but how popular is he going to be? We also know that the floor on those guys is basically zero. So, you do go more popular route with Juju or MVS, or, if McKinnon plays, you go that route. I mean, none of them are ideal, but one of them is probably going to work, but good luck picking it. We got Jalen Hurts coming in, $8,000 on DraftKings, going up against the Titans. Also cash and GPP viable for me. And, very similar to Mahomes in the fact that, you're going to tell me that I can play Hurts at under 10% ownership. Here, though, he's going up against the Titans, and they are giving up the fourth most points to quarterbacks on this slate. I mean, sold, right? Such a good play here, Now, of course, Mahomes doesn't have the same matchup, so to speak. I mean, the Titans, on paper at least, are a little bit better matchup, but they're not going to be able to probably give the pushback that the Bengals are going to do, which is what makes that Bengals-Chiefs game a little bit better. But I love the idea of stacking, Hurts and AJ Brown. I feel like AJ Brown is looking like he's going to come in under-owned, and in this revenge game, I'm very interested. Early on in the week, I'm just really loving the Hurts and AJ Brown stack. Next up, we'll talk Justin Herbert, $7,200, going up against Las Vegas Raiders. Cash and GPP viable. I got a feeling by the time Sunday rolls around, I think Herbert is going to end up being the highest owned quarterback on the slate. I mean, and why not? I mean, there's just so much to like here. Matchup is great. The game environment is great. I mean, sure, it'd be great if, Mike Williams is back this week, but, to be honest, it's not like Herbert is, lacking weapons. And, while you could easily stack Herbert here, I think my favorite play is just simply stacking him with Eckler and moving on to a Raiders run back. I think that's the way that if I play Herbert stacks, that's the way I'm going to go. I'm kind of leaning towards going elsewhere just because I think it's going to be so popular. But man, just the thought of what him and Eckler, can do on a, PPR site like DraftKings, it's going to be hard to get away from. But I mean, again, there's so many plays this week. Joe Burrow, beautiful $6,900. In that, opposite side of Mahomes there in that, Chiefs and Bengals matchup. Again, cash and GPP viable for me. Um, Especially if Jamar Chase is back this week. I expect that Mahomes will actually be less owned than what we're going to see Burrow. Part of that is the salary savings, but I also think that part of that is that, Burrow and Mahomes in this particular matchup, I think have a very similar ceiling. And, the stacking options here for the Bengals are much more defined. And, those are the reasons why I think that Burrow is going to be higher owned. Obviously, in a vacuum, Mahomes is, a better player. But, in the context here of DFS, I think Mahomes doesn't make as much sense necessarily here as Burrow would. But I personally prefer if Chase plays, even if only because that's going to take some ownership off of T. Higgins. And T. Higgins is whom I prefer to stack Burrow with here in this game. KC run back, though, just like we talked about, with who to stack with Mahomes, the run back for KC becomes a problem. Yeah, of course, you could just go with Kelsey and then, figure out the rest of your lineup. That's obviously not going to be as unique. So you'll have to hit on something, maybe not off the wall, but something, unique somewhere. Or you could just go a little bit off script, with that run back and hope you're right. Like I said, Sky Moore, Justin Watson, Jared McKinnon, those are ways to get off. Even Pacheco could work. You just got to figure out what you're going to do, and that's what makes that game hard for me, and actually pushes me in other directions. I think, but we'll see. It may just be too good to pass up. Speaking of being pushed in other directions, Tua comes in $6,700 on DraftKings. Interesting matchup against the 49ers. I consider him to be GPP viable only. And I'll tell you, my initial lean this week for GPPs is Tua. I love the idea, of this Dolphins and 49ers game turning into a shootout. I mean, both teams know that running is going to be a struggle. I think that there's a good chance that they just both lean into their passing games, and that is going to result in some points. The beautiful thing about Tua and, why, he's been so stackable all year is, where he's throwing the ball. So, there's very fine definition in who to stack him with. And this week, the ownership, it's going to be the lowest you're going to get all year long. Hill and Waddle, probably going to be the lowest ownership you're going to get him for the rest of the year. To me, this really feels like a great spot. Take a shot with some, Tua double stacks. Eat the salary, but have an incredible ceiling with a very low cumulative ownership. I really think that this here could be the key that unlocks the gold mine for winning this week. But it's expensive. And if I'm bringing it back, I think right now Ayuk would be my favorite bring back. I don't think you could afford CMC and make it make sense. Not that I want to play CMC necessarily this week. Kind of same thing with Debo. I kind of like Ayuk. I wish he was cheaper, but he's not unreasonably priced. So I think that's probably where I would go in that lineup. Trevor Lawrence, $5,900 going up against the Lions. Cash and GPP viable here. Right now, he is projecting to be, the chalk at quarterback, highest owned guy. And I see that ownership coming down at least a little bit as the week goes on. And again, just because there's so many, quarterback options this week. And I think, some of that ownership from Lawrence gets pushed to Herbert, like I said. But, we can't deny the matchup here. By a significant margin, the Lions are giving up the most points to quarterbacks on the slate. And the stacking options, again, here are pretty clear. Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, pretty defined stacking partners here. I guess you could get off the board a little bit if you want to throw, Evan Ingram in there to fill that tight end slot, with a double stack. Marvin Jones, a revenge game against the Lions, if you wanted to. But Kirk and Zay are where I'm sticking. They aren't really that expensive, and I think the run back is very obvious. Amon St. Brown, I think that's where you not have to go, but that's where most people are going to go here. And all of that just makes this very chalky if you want to play this stack. So, you will have to get different somewhere else in your lineup. But with the savings that you get here from stacking this, I don't think you'll have a whole lot of trouble doing that. You'll be able to slide in a player or two, maybe a little bit more on the higher price side that isn't going to garner nearly as much ownership. Have some price pivots in there, and that could be a way that if this goes off and your stack is correct, that's how you take down a tournament here. Um, for me, it's really just a question of, does this game live up to its, point total? I don't think it does. I'm a bigger fan this week of just a mini stack with St. Brown and Kirk, but stacking it here is obviously viable as Lawrence is projecting so high of ownership. And then let's talk some Mitch White here, man. $5,400 going up against the Vikings. GPP only play for me. Unlike last week, playing Mike White here is not going to be sneaky at all. Savings here are going to be great and, pretty easy just to stack him with Garrett Wilson. You run it back with Justin Jefferson, you move on. Problem is that's going to be highly owned. So yeah, you'll save some money, but you are trusting Mike White, which isn't the craziest thing in the world, but it's going to be highly owned. So I don't know. You do what you want to do here. There's going to be plenty of other games here and plenty of other game environments that I like more. So I don't see myself going here. But I mean, it's definitely viable. And then if you want to get even further off the script, last one we'll talk about here, Jared Goff going up against Jacksonville. GPP only play for me. I want to give you one final option here in case you wanted to, really get different, but yet, remain viable. And, part of the reason I like this so much is it is just a simple way to take advantage of the public confidence in Lawrence game stacks. Just hop on over to the other side of the field and voila, you have Jared Goff and the Lions. Goff also does have a really good matchup here. Jags get shredded through the air, giving up the 6th most points to quarterbacks on this slate. While they do a decent job of holding their own against the run, not exactly a pass funnel, but a team that does give it up in the air more than it does on the ground. And sure, Lions want to run the football, but, if the Jags do start scoring points here, if you believe in this game total, then the Lions have proven that they're more than capable of throwing to score points. So, same as, the Lawrence stacks. Options here are pretty obvious. Amon-Ra St. Brown for the Lions, and then either Kirk or Zay on the opposite side for the Jags. Leaves you plenty salary to get different elsewhere. I do like the idea of playing Goff more than Lawrence, even for the leverage alone. But, just like the Mike White stats, I think that I just find myself going, to other options that I like a little bit better. So, bunch of quarterbacks there that we talked about. Let's move on into some running backs here. Right at the top of my list, Austin Eckler, $8,500 against the Raiders. Cash and GPP viable. Flat out, he's just a play at running back this week. And the thing is, everybody knows it. His ownership, won't get crazy out of hand because of his price. But, I mean, he's going to be popular and probably the highest owned running back on the slate. For me, he's a priority cash play. And he's a priority GPP play as well. As popular as he's going to be, I'm going to see if I can find a way to get overweight on him on a full PPR site like DraftKings. All of those little dump off catches for 4, 5, 6 yards, they add up quick. And as I mentioned with Herbert, I do love stacking Eckler in my Herbert lineups. I probably won't build any without Eckler, to be honest with you. I think he's a guy that anyone playing the cheaper game stacks like, the Goff or the Mike Whites, I think he's a guy that they jam in. That's kind of where I think is an easy spot to take those savings and put him on a guy like Eckler. So pivoting to a guy in a similar price range that's less popular, honestly, in large field tournaments, that might really be the better way to go. And then, if you want to take something down, if you're just playing to cash and get a little return on your money, that's fine. But if you're looking to take something down, then I think that could be your better option here. And I've got a couple guys that we're going to talk about where you can do that. But no matter the situation, playing Eckler here is going to be a fine choice. Derrick Henry, $8,100 against the Eagles. He's GPP only for me. And I'll just start off by saying that I like Henry significantly more if Jordan Davis is out. If Davis plays, probably just going to fade Henry, focus my salary elsewhere. Running Henry back in a Hurts and Brown lineup, it's very interesting, but I think making that salary work is going to be very tough. So if I play Henry, it's going to be as a one-off, likely stacked up with the Titans D, which ends up being the cheapest of the week. So that's going to make it popular, but it's doable here. And then the guy I'm most excited here to talk about, Nick Chubb, even $8,000 on DraftKings, going up against the Texans, cash and GPP viable for me. Very intriguing for me this week. Deshaun Watson's coming back. We don't know exactly what the Browns' offense will look like. We do know for sure, though, that the Texans' rushing defense is just historically bad. Something that I've been attacking all year long. And we have a situation where, arguably the best running back in the league gets the matchup against the worst, team against the run. And his price is honestly perfect because, it's a pivot directly off of, the two chalkiest players at the position. I really think Nick Chubb is going to win somebody a lot of money this week. And the two price pivots we're talking about really here are Austin Eckler, and then the next guy on my list, Josh Jacobs, $7,900. So $100 less than Chubb, but I mean, price pivot there. He goes up against the Chargers, GPP viable only for me. And I want Josh Jacobs to play this week. And for a variety of reasons that oddly enough are not because I want, to build a lineup around him. I have a feeling that Jacobs is either going to miss this week's game or he's going to be limited enough that he just is not worth $8,000. But again, for me, I kind of want him to be an option for other people, just because I really want people to get even further off of Chubb, and I want less people on Eckler, and I want less people on Devontae Adams. I get anyone that wants to play a healthy Josh Jacobs this week, but even if we do get that, I'm still going to be off him this week for those other players. I just think I like other people better here for as far as lineup options this week. Joe Mixon, $7,100 going up against the Chiefs. Again, a game we're going to talk about a lot. GPP only option for me. A lot of that's just surrounding the fact of his health, and if he does play, will he be limited? If I knew it was a fully healthy Joe Mixon, might be another guy that is a priority cash play, but here, assuming Mixon suits up this week, I still do really like him. I like him more for his ceiling than his floor, though. I do think for tournaments as well, it's great leverage off of, what's going to be a very popular passing game there in Cincinnati. And Mixon still gives you access to a lot of touchdown equity. And that game's going to be the most popular and probably the highest scoring game of the week. So, his upside at that point is really just slate breaking. And I don't think the ownership is going to reflect that. So it makes him a nice play. DeAndre Swift, $5,600, matched up here against the Jaguars. GPP only for me. Excuse me, need a drink. Like I said, got a lot of players to go through this week. And, I'll be straight up with you. I don't know that I have the balls to play DeAndre Swift this week, but goddamn if he doesn't make for an interesting play. He's not on the injury list, or on the injury report, I should say, for literally the first time this season. Everyone's going to be attacking the passing game here, with this 50-plus point total. If Swift is truly healthy, he is just one of the best dual threat running backs in the game. He absolutely could go nuclear here, and he could break the slate. And he could do that with very limited ownership and a pretty cheap salary for a guy of his caliber. It's something to think about. And then lastly, we'll talk Brian Robinson, $5,300 going up against the Giants. Potentially cash and GPP viable for me here. If Antonio Gibson misses this week, Robinson becomes a cash lock for me. And that's just because of that's cheap salary and the workload that he would get. he'd also get pretty steamed in that case in GPPs, but would definitely still be in play. Definitely not a dream matchup here by any means, but it's not a bad matchup. And without Gibson, you're going to see a pretty hefty volume there. So those are the running backs for you this week. Let's head on over here to wide receiver. And man, it's loaded. It's absolutely loaded here, guys. When we've got a great selection of quarterbacks, that means we've also got a great selection of wide receivers too. And we'll start at the top here. Justin Jefferson, $8,900 against the Jets. Cash and GPP viable for me. No secret that Jefferson is an elite receiver, so he's always going to be in play. Now, I mentioned him as a game stacking partner with Mike White, and I think you could mini stack him with Wilson as well. Especially with the mini stack, I will say that these two guys, Wilson and Jefferson, they're going to be extraordinarily chalky. Projected to be two of the highest owned wide receivers on the slate. So if you did decide to go that route, just know that you are eating a ton of chalk, and are really going to need to differentiate yourself elsewhere. Probably better off just playing them in a game stack if you're going to put them together. But I mean, hard to argue with putting them together. Tyreek Hill, $8,800 going up against the 49ers. He is going to be GPP only for me. I mean, Hill's one of my two favorite players on this slate. And I mentioned when I was talking about Tua, that I just love the idea of a Dolphin stack this week. Hill's got the highest ceiling of anyone on this slate, even with a tough matchup. Nobody's going to shut Hill down if the Dolphins decide that they just want to pepper him, with a high target volume. It's just, the guy's just uncoverable. Devontae Adams, $8,700 going up against the Chargers. He's GPP viable for me. He's my preferred run back with, the popular Herbert stacks this week. Like I mentioned earlier, though, I hope Jacob plays, just because I want to see that, drop the ownership that, Adams gets. Going to be really hard to play him outside of a game stack, just because of his price. And to be honest, if Adam does go off, you're probably going to need one of the QBs in that game if you want to take down a tournament. So not really a big fan of a mini stack there. And then AJ Brown, $7,800 against the Titans. Cash and GPP viable for me. It's Hill and Brown. They're my two favorite plays on this slate. I think stacking Hurts in this revenge game for Brown is something I'm highly interested in. Titans are giving up the second most points to wide receivers on this slate. I mean, I don't know what more you want. Just sign me up for that. Jalen Waddle, $7,400 against San Francisco. GPP viable only for me. As always, Waddle comes in with lower ownership than Hill. I mean, rightfully so. If this game shoots out like I think it can, Waddle again here becomes a guy that could break the slate. I really like the idea of these two double stacks, with Waddle and Hill. I won't play him as a one-off, just because, and I won't do a mini stack either, because if Waddle does go nuclear, I think then you would need Tua along with him if you want to take something down. T. Higgins, $7,200 against Kansas City. Cash and GPP viable for me. Again here with this game, right? It's going to be the most popular on the slate, and I like T over Chase this week. With Chase coming back from the injury, in this matchup, I'm not as confident in him as I am in T. Obviously, Chase does have the higher ceiling, but it's not like T is that far behind. And when Chase is on the field, you'd be surprised. T's numbers are pretty damn good. He's better than when Chase is off the field, I think. With that in mind, though, really hope Chase plays. I want him to steal some of that ownership from T. Obviously, play here is not going to be sneaky, but I could get behind T as a one-off. I know, especially, I've been talking about how hard it is to guess which KC player you want to correlate him with. If you really want to just eliminate that factor and just play T, it's a little bit, unusual from what we would normally suggest here for you. But in this particular instance, I think it makes sense. Amon-Ra St. Brown, $7,100, going up against the Jags. Cash and GPP viable for me. In fact, cash lock here for Amon-Ra St. Brown. I have no idea how his price remains as low as it is. Dude is 6 in target share over the last 3 weeks. Feels like a lock for at least 10 targets. He's going to be very chalky. In cash, I don't care. In GPPs, I probably only want to play him in a game stack, just because stacking him with either Jones or Kirk is just going to be pretty popular. So if I do that, I probably want a quarterback with him. But again, hard to argue against the mini stack, either. Terry McLaurin, $5,800 against the Giants. Cash and GPP viable for me. I mean, dude is 3rd in target share over the last 3 weeks. I feel like I talk about him every week. Ever since Heineke took over, just a completely different player. He's just dominating, the targets there. Matchup is pretty tough on paper, but, the volume's going to be there, and I think the price is right. I always prefer volume over matchup. So, I don't like the tougher matchups, but maybe it just means that, that'll, hamper his ownership a little bit. Maybe we can get him cheaper, ownership wise than what he should come in. So I do like Terry McLaurin. Last guy I want to give you here, Treylon Burks, $4,600 against the Eagles. GPP option for me. And he's my favorite run back in Hurt stacks. And oddly enough, it's looking like he's going to draw some fairly low, total ownership. I will warn you, though, I don't want you to think that, because his ownership is low, it makes him, sneaky, because if you play him as a run back in Hurt stacks, then I think that's where a lot of people are going to go. So you're not going to get unique there. But, as long as you realize that, you're not getting too unique, even with his low ownership and those stacks, I think you'll be okay. And let's get the tight end here. Usually I like to skip through this pretty quick, but again, I've just got a ton of tight ends. So Travis Kelce, $7,900 going up against the Bengals. Cash and GPP viable. And let's be honest, I mean, is Kelce even really a tight end? To me, he's more of a wide receiver, and he's the wide receiver 1 on the Chiefs. I mean, that is their passing game. It is Mahomes to Kelce. And again, I said earlier, it feels really tough for me to play Mahomes and not stack him with Kelce. He's the one guy that is going to get targets, you're going to get production from. And it would be really hard to play Kelce in non-game stacks just because of his cost. But I also don't think it's a good idea because, like I've said earlier with other guys, if Kelce goes nuts, you're going to want to have Mahomes with him. Mark Andrews, $6,600 going up against the Broncos. GPP only for me. Man, Mark Andrews hurt me last week, guys. I played him in cash, and he was outplayed by Josh Oliver. Then Andrews goes ahead, drops a touchdown, which would have more than salvaged his day, but it just wasn't to be. I don't think I can, bring myself to play Andrews this week. I'm going to need to see, Lamar Jackson get back at it. I mean, this was my single entry route last week. I kind of want to get ahead of Lamar Jackson and Andrews before they, broke out. I don't know that I trust that to happen anymore. Gerald Everett, $4,400 against the Raiders. GPP viable for me. I'm only going to be playing him in Herbert game stacks, but I think that pairing him with Eckler along with Herbert is a way to get a little bit unique. I think he's going to come in under-owned, considering this game environment. And Pat Freiermuth, $4,300 against the Falcons. GPP viable here for me. With Kenny Pickett under center, it's been Freiermuth and Pickens, that have seen the value increase. Deontay Johnson is, missing Ben Roethlisberger. He's just not been the same, There's just not a ceiling for Deontay. His floor isn't terrible, but there's just no ceiling. But I think here for me, though, Freiermuth, I think he's too expensive for, his role in this offense, as far as for me playing him in cash. And I'm not going to spend up this much at tight end this week. So not without, being part of the game stack. So, I don't like Muth, or I'm sorry, I do like Muth, but I just don't see a path to getting him into my lineups this week. Cole Kmet, $3,800 going up against the Fudge Packers. GPP viable only for me. And that comes with a further caveat of if Fields play, then I'm going to keep him in my GPP pool. If Fields does not play, then Cole Kmet is just going to be a full fade for me. Foster Moreau, $3,600 against the Chargers. This is the cash and GPP viable play. I feel like it's just been copy and paste, with Foster Moreau and cash for quite a while now. And I don't think this week's any different. Likely going to be my cash tight end, but we'll see. The next guy on the list is another guy that I'm considering, and it might even just be a coin flip between the two of them. In GPPs, though, using Moreau, in that Herbert in a double bring back, I think is a unique way here to get access to that game and to fill your tight end slot. So that's definitely something that you want to think about if you think that game is going to be as high scoring as some people think. And, we know that Herbert's going to throw the ball around, and, if Raiders have to play catch up, it could be the way to go there with that, double bring back. Hayden Hurst, $3,500 against the Chiefs, cash and GPP viable. If I don't end up playing Moreau in cash, it's going to be Hayden Hurst. $100 difference between the two. Really don't know which one I prefer at this point. $100 in salary difference, so makes them basically interchangeable. Very similar plays. I do think I lean towards Hurst just because I think his ceiling is a little bit higher, but Moreau is a fine play there as well. And then lastly, I would say last but not least, but in this case, it is definitely last because it is least. Defense and special teams. Like I've been saying for quite a while now, my advice here, simply correlate it with one of your running backs, or at least use someone that's going to be less than 5% owned, and, is going to be relatively cheap as well. That is GPP talk. When I'm talking about cash, I'm really looking to spend as little money as possible. So I don't want to just default play the cheapest defense. I would like to play something that the matchup isn't so bad, but the default is, to pay down. So if my bottom 6 defenses, for example, all had tough matchups, I'd say fucking just play the cheap one if they're all the same. So hard to predict what defenses do. It's so volatile. But, ideally in GPPs, I've been saying you play a defense, it pairs with your running back, it's cheap and under 5%. So that's a lot of hoops, to jump through. But each week I've been giving you, the list of those teams. They're usually pretty ugly, but this is what I think you need to be doing in GPPs, to give yourself the best chance to win. So again, defense appears with your running back is cheap, under 5% ownership. Currently for me, that is looking at the Bengals, the Raiders, the Dolphins, the Bears, the Jaguars, and the Lions. So those are the ones that I'm eyeing up here for my defense this week. Well, I appreciate you guys tuning in again here. If you haven't done so yet, I need you to pop over here, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you turn on notifications so you get an alert every single time a new video comes out. Drop a like on here for me so that I know that you've watched. I know that you've enjoyed the video and that you're looking forward to winning some money along with me in week 13. I'll see you next week.